stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks at one time or another sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going in the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else because you won't need it. I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that. And when you don't find them, you don't do anything. What he did was he got me thinking, not as a stock as something with a ticker symbol that wiggles around and that you look at charts on or anything. He taught me to think about it as part of a business, and that was vital. And he taught me not to really pay any attention to stock market fluctuations except when they were working in my favor, so that not to get elated because something had gone up or depressed because it went down. So if I knew the facts on something and it went down, I bought more of it, and because I looked at it as a business.
People ask me what they should take in business school, or even if they don't go to business school, what they need to know before getting in business. And I tell them, you have to understand accounting. It's the language. I mean, it's like being in a foreign country without knowing the language if you're in business and you don't understand accounting. So you want to get as comfortable with that as you are with the English language. It's made me a lot of money because I listened to what Ray Dean had to say 53 or 4 years ago and have been able to understand what I was seeing on pieces of paper, what that told me about businesses and the limitations of what it told me about businesses. But that's the way we invest. How do I value the businesses Berkshire acquires? Well, the first thing I have to decide when somebody calls me is valuing this business within my circle of competence. I don't know how to value Microsoft. I don't know how to value Oracle. I mean, if Larry Ellison calls me or Bill Gates calls me, and they don't. But if any of those, I don't know, or biotech or anything, I wouldn't know how to value it. I just, I'd wish them well and tell them, I think it's worth twice as much as they think it is, but I'm just not in the mood to buy it today. I don't know. So it has to be within my circle of competence. My circle of competence is, businesses I can understand. And when I say understand, I don't mean understand how to use a computer or not use a computer in terms of a computer company. I mean understand what the economic characteristics of the business are and what the company's really going to look like in 5 or 10 or 20 years. Bill Gates will tell you that if he were investing, he would buy Berkshire rather than Microsoft because it's so much easier to understand what our businesses are going to look like, whereas he's in a business where you're going to really have to be doing things differently over time. So I know that Wrigley's is going to be the #1 chewing gum in the country. I know Snickers is going to be the #1 candy bar in the country 10 years from now. It's been the #1 candy bar for 40 years. You don't have to be very bright to understand that when people lay out 50 cents for something that they stick in their mouth, that they're not about to experiment. So we try to look at businesses we can understand.
You can't keep always trying. For the average person who's maybe never bought a stock before, what's your advice about that? You can't constantly sit there and wait and say, oh, it's going to go higher, it's going to go higher.
We don't even think about that. What we think about is how much is it selling for, how much do we think it's worth. When we bought it at $35 billion effectively, I felt the company was probably worth at least $100 billion.
How did it come to your attention? How do you find a stock like PetroChina?
I sit there in my office and I read an annual report, which fortunately was in English, and it described a very good company. And told about the oil reserves, told about the refining, told about the chemicals, everything else. And I sat there and read it, and I thought to myself, this company is worth about $100 billion. Now, I didn't look at the price first. I look at the business first and try and figure out what it's worth, because if I look at the price first, I'll get influenced by that. So I look at the company first. I try to value it, and then I look at the price, and if the price is way less than what I've just valued it at, I'm going to buy it.
Intrinsic value is the number that if you were all-knowing about the future and could predict all the cash that a business would give you between now and Judgment Day, discounted at the proper discount rate, that number is what the intrinsic value of a business is. In other words, the only reason for making an investment and laying out money now is to get more money later on, right? That's what investing is all about. Now, when you look at a stock, when you look at a bond, assuming it's the United States government bond, it's very easy to tell how much you're going to get back. It says it right on the bond. It says when you get the interest payments. It says when you get the principal. So it's very easy to figure out the value of a bond. It can change tomorrow if interest rates change. But the cash flows are printed on the bond. The cash flows aren't printed on a stock certificate. That's the job of the analyst, is to print out, change that stock certificate, which represents an interest in the business, and change that into a bond and say, this is what I think it's going to pay out in the future. When we buy, some new machine for Shaw to make carpet, that's what we're thinking about, obviously, and you all learn that in business school. But it's the same thing for a big business. If you buy Coca-Cola today, the company is selling for about $110 to $15 billion in the market. The question is, if you had 110 or 15 billion, you wouldn't be listening to me, but I'd be listening to you incidentally. But the question is, would you lay it out today to get what the Coca-Cola company is going to deliver to you over the next 200 or 300 years? The discount rate doesn't make much difference as you get further out. And that is a question of how much cash they're going to give you. It isn't a question of, it isn't a question about how many analysts are going to recommend it or what the volume in the stock is or what the chart looks like or anything. It's a question of how much cash it's going to give you. That's the only reason. It's true if you're buying a farm. It's true if you're buying an apartment house. Any financial asset. Oil in the ground, you're laying out cash now to get more cash back later on. And the question is how much are you going to get, when are you going to get it, and how sure are you? And when I calculate intrinsic value of a business, when we buy businesses, and whether we're buying all of a business or a little piece of a business, I always think we're buying the whole business because that's my approach to it. I look at it and say, what will come out of this business and when? And what you really like, of course, is them to be able to use the money they earn and earn higher returns on it as you go along. I mean, Berkshire has never distributed anything to its shareholders, but its ability to distribute goes up as the value of the businesses we own increases. We can compound it internally, but the real question is, Berkshire selling for, we'll say, 105 or so billion now. What can we distribute from that 100? If you're going to buy the whole company for 105 billion now, can we distribute enough cash to you soon enough to make it sensible at present interest rates to lay out that cash now? And that's what it gets down to. And if you can't answer that question, you can't buy the stock. You can gamble in the stock if you want to, or your neighbors can buy it. But if you don't answer that question, and I can't answer that for internet companies, for example. There are a lot of companies, there are all kinds of companies I can't answer it for, but I just stay away from those. In terms of our wholly owned businesses, we're not going to sell no matter how much anybody offers us for them. I mean, if somebody offers us 3 times what something is worth at See's Candy, the Buffalo News, Borsheim's, whatever it may be, we're not going to sell it. I may be wrong in having that approach. I know I'm not wrong if I owned 100% of Berkshire because that's the way I want to live my life. I've got all the money I could possibly need. It just amounts to a change in the newspaper story on my obituary and the amount of money that the foundation has. And to break off relationships with people I like and people that have joined me because they think it's a permanent home, to do that simply because somebody waves a big check at me would be like selling one of my children because somebody waved a big check. So I won't do that. And I want to tell my partners I won't do it so that they're not disappointed in me. More and more with certain stocks, we've got that approach. Now, if we were chronically short of funds and had all kinds of opportunities coming, we might have a somewhat different approach. But our inclination is not to sell things unless we get really discouraged perhaps with the management, or we think the economic characteristics of the business change in a big way. I mean, and that happens. So, but we're not going to sell simply because it looks too high, in all likelihood. I mean, you can't make that 100%.
Charlie Munger and I have been making stock decisions and business decisions one way or another together now for 55 years. We have never the macro doesn't enter into it, nor does political. We have not made decisions differently because one party or the other's in power. We have not made decisions based on whether we thought interest rates were going to go up or down, or what was going to happen with labor negotiations someplace. You don't want to give up what you know how to do because of opinions which you don't know whether are right or not, and which are going to be transitory in any event. So you really go out there every day and do whatever makes the most sense. So when we buy the auto dealerships last week, we don't factor in anything about the Fed, about the deadlock in politics, about what's going on around the world. Those are all important things, but they don't affect whether those dealerships, which we're buying to own 100 years, they don't affect whether they're going to make money in the year 2024 or 2034 or 2044. And the important thing is whether we get a good business with good management at a sensible price. If you buy a business, if you buy a farm, you go up and look, every couple of weeks to see how far the corn is up, and do you worry too much about whether somebody says this is going to be a year of low prices because exports are being affected or anything like that? You buy a farm and you hold it for. I've got one farm that I bought in the 1980s, and my son runs it, but I've been there once. I mean, it doesn't grow faster if I go and stare at it. I can't cheer for it. More effort, or something like that. And I know there's going to be some years when prices are going to be good and some when the prices aren't going to be good. I know there's years when yields will be better than others. But I bought the farm, and it just doesn't. I don't care about economic predictions on it or anything of the sort. I do care that over the years it's well tended to in terms of rotating crops, and I hope yields get better, which they generally have. In fact, that farm 100 years ago would have probably produced 30 bushels, maybe 35 bushels of corn per acre. And now in a good year, it'd be 200. I mean, we've really made progress in this country. That's one reason commodity prices, if you go back a couple hundred years, they've moved so little, is because we've just gotten better and better at whether it's cotton or whether it's corn or soybeans or all kinds of things. And you and I have benefited from that.
And so Apple is kind of like a farm.
Well, it's a long-term investment, and if you own the best auto dealership in town, the best brand, and you had somebody good running it, you wouldn't drop by every day and say, how many people have come in today, or I think interest rates are going up a little, maybe it'll slow down our sales or anything. No, you buy it knowing there's 365 days a year, and you're going to own it for 20 years, so that's 7,300 days, and things are going to be different from day to day and year to year. You shouldn't buy it if the day-to-day stuff is important. Famous lesson about a margin of safety, that you don't drive a truck that weighs 9,900 pounds across a bridge that says limit 10,000 pounds, because you can't be that sure about it. If you see something like that, you go down a little further down the road and you find one that says limit 20,000 pounds, and that's the one you drive across.